All right, we've got a great group on the call this morning. My name is Breanne Bales. If we've not met before, it's good to see you. I'm the manager for the Homeless Contribution Income Tax Credit, or HCTC is the acronym that I'll be using throughout the call this morning. So the presentation today is going to focus on the changes to HCTC based on Senate Bill 24-16. So our agenda today is going to give some background based on maybe you do or don't know about the tax credit and the bill that was just passed. So we're going to share a little bit about that and some specific information about intermediate organizations, the timeline of the changes, and I'm going to share what the Salesforce platform looks like in regard to the changes. Give a little bit of guidelines regarding fees and donations, and some to round everything off with some important program reminders. So if you do have questions, I will pause intermittently throughout the call today. If you want to raise your hand, I'd be happy to try to answer as I pause for those questions throughout the presentation, or we'll be monitoring the chat periodically as well. So HCTC was created by House Bill 22-1083. And so 2023 was the first year that was in existence. So we went by the statute that was created by that original bill as in regards to our policies related to some of the changes that happened with Senate Bill 24-16, which we'll go into in a bit. HCTC in 2023 replaced the homelessness related activities portion of the enterprise zone tax credit, which was managed by the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. And HCTC just provides a tax credit to Colorado taxpayers who contribute to eligible projects within your organizations that assist those who are experiencing homelessness, or in the case of prevention, are at risk of experiencing homelessness. So the core purpose and most of the program remained the same according to this original statute. These are basically the summary of changes from Senate Bill 24-16. So previously, by statute, the full 9 digits of the Social Security number and the FEIN were required on the tax credit certificate. In addition, contributions through intermediary organizations were not allowed, and the annual report was due by February 15th of every year. There were some administrative challenges with some of these aspects, and so we're happy to say that these changes are in place to hopefully help you in administering the program and making it just a better outcomes for your organization. So now the last 4 digits of the Social Security number are included on the certificate. The full FEIN is still required for tax credits to business taxpayers, so that piece did not change. It's still the 9 digits for FEIN. Now, contributions through intermediary organizations are allowed, and I'm going to go in more specific detail on this in just a moment. And then annual report is due to be published, finalized, everything all set and ready to go by June 30th is our deadline moving forward on an annual basis. So what is an intermediary organization? The definition on this slide is the official language according to statute of what a qualified intermediary means. And so I've broken it down a little bit on this next slide. Basically, an intermediary organization is a 501c3 nonprofit. The organization does not have the authority to spend the donor's money just as they wish, but they are obligated to pass those funds over to your organization as the donor has directed. This is one of the main differences between an intermediary organization and a donor advised fund. Donor advised fund is not actually legally required to pass those funds on. The donor advises where they would like the funds to go, but they actually don't have ownership or of those funds anymore. And so that's a difference as I understand it. So donor advised funds are still not eligible for those contributions for HCTC. However, intermediary organizations are, according to these legislative changes. Some common intermediary organizations that you may be familiar with are the Colorado Gives Foundation, Mile High United Way, Give Pikes Peak, or some smaller organizations may have a fiscal sponsor that acts as an intermediary. This list is obviously not comprehensive. These are just some of the bigger names. And I'm imagine that you may receive gifts through other intermediaries as well. So yeah, looking forward to implementing this moving forward. So the timeline for submitting these changes, we had until August 6th today to make sure all the changes were implemented. And contributions may be submitted according to these new standards for any date for tax year 2024. So if you had a qualifying contribution given on January 1st of this year or later, you can now submit that contribution using only the last 4 digits of the Social Security number or ITIN. Likewise, contributions through intermediary organizations given any time during this tax year are eligible. So please share this with your donors so that they're aware, and you can begin submitting those contributions for this tax year. Are there any questions regarding information I've shared so far? I don't see anything in the chat. Awesome. So I'm going to demonstrate some of the Salesforce changes within our platform, but this slide gives an overview of what those changes are. So now all records include only the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. So if you've had donations, from previously from your donors, those records have now been redacted to just the 4 digits. And now entry forms only allow the last 4 digits of the Social Security number or ITIN to be submitted. For intermediary organizations, we are now tracking donations through intermediary organizations. And so both the donor submission form and the nonprofit platform have been edited to be able to track, yes, this gift was given through an intermediary or not. And so we do ask for cumulative donations that you submit those separately for donations given directly to your organization and donations that are through an intermediary. So an example with this would be maybe you're going through the quarter, you're trying to submit those contributions for one donor. They gave $300 total for the quarter. 200 of that went directly to your organization, and maybe $100 they gave through an intermediary. We would ask for those donations to be submitted separately so that we're able to accurately track which donations have gone through the various intermediary organizations. So in that situation, the donor would have 2 submissions for that quarter. They would have the $200 that went directly to your organization, then you would submit separately the $100 through the intermediary. We do ask, as you are using Salesforce moving forward, to send any errors to our general inbox. So We've had some lovely nonprofit testers. Thank you so much to those who have helped us test the system, but realize that errors may end up happening. And so we do ask for you to submit those to our general email inbox. I just placed that in the chat if you don't have that on hand. But any screenshots are helpful. Any information about what you think triggered the error may be helpful, like if it was a business donor, an individual donor, if it was through an intermediary or not. Some of those details we may or may not ask you. So appreciate that. But the system should be working as of today, and appreciate your patience, and especially thank you to our testers who helped us with that. We do have one error that has occurred that doesn't directly have anything to do with these changes, but I wanted to flag it here. Our quarterly certificates did not produce within the system on August 1st as expected. So for the handful of organizations that you're on a quarterly timeline for your certificates, those are not available currently in your Salesforce platform. Those contributions are still marked as pending. So the Salesforce team is working on getting those produced this week, and I'll send an email to those quarterly organizations when they're available. So let's go ahead and get started on showing you these changes. So the main place that we'll be focusing on is the contribution form. So this is a test account that I have, and I'm going to select new contribution, add new contribution, and just going to fill out the contribution information as normal. And now this question is here. It asks, is this gift through an intermediary organization? And you're able to select yes or no for this question. And go ahead and click next. And this is also another change. So in order to search for the donor by social security number or ITIN, you will include the last 4 digits of that donor's tax ID, social security number or ITIN, and then their last name. So when you click next, it's going to search and see, okay, here is the donor with that last name and the last 4 digits, and you can select them and move forward. Now, because I said yes, this contribution was submitted through an intermediary organization, there is this search feature for you to be able to add an intermediary organization. So you can, if you know the name of the organization, you can type it in, click show more results, and these are the names that have the word test in them. So if this one of these was really the organization I was looking for, I could just select it and hit next and move on with submitting my contribution. But let's say I searched for let's say I search for the name of the organization and it doesn't pop up. So let me just search for my name. Let's say I have an organization named after me. I'm searching for it. It doesn't pop up. It says no results for Brienne in intermediate organization. So I'm going to click cancel. I'm going to make sure this field is blank, and then I'm going to click next. This allows me the opportunity to submit an organization name and the FEIN of that intermediary organization. Be sure to submit no dashes for that number. or it won't accept it. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. Done adding contribution, next, and successfully submitted. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in the contributions tab as well. But it looks like we have a question in the chat. Explain what an ITIN means. What's the difference with FEIN? So an ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number. It's a tax ID for those who do not have a social security number, and it's used with individuals, not businesses. And so some people, if they do not have a social security number but do pay income tax, they file with an ITIN. And we do have a few donors in the system that have used ITIN.
Brianna, I also want to flag Rachel has her hand up.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Hey, can you share a little bit of information on why we're choosing to track donations given through intermediary organizations separately?
I think it's mostly so that we have that data to be able to include in our annual report and be able to see what contributions are given directly to your organization versus the ones that flow through various pass-through organizations. I think it also will be telling to see the impact of the legislation, to see how much income is generated for your organizations through these channels for HCTC.
Okay, thank you.
And another note, we have a question on if Colorado Gives is spelled out or if it's CO Gives. That's why we do have the FEIN included within each organization to try to prevent duplicates, because as some of you all know, some organizations have a doing business as name versus their official tax name, and we just want to make sure we don't have duplicates for the intermediary organizations. So if you search by maybe a nickname for an organization, it doesn't pop up, but then maybe you try to add one from scratch and it's saying there's a duplicate, then that's probably the case where that FEIN is within the system, within maybe the official tax name associated with that intermediary organization. And we have a question from Betty regarding what is considered an intermediary organization. So I'll go ahead and go back to that slide so that you can take a look at those points. Basically, Colorado Gives is one of the biggest ones throughout the state as an intermediary organization. So contributions through that platform would be considered contributions through an intermediary. And we also have a question of who qualifies the donor once they are in Salesforce. I'm not sure I totally understand that question. If you do search for a donor and you notice the information is not correct, like their address is out of date or other contact information, please send an email to us at the Division of Housing at that general inbox that I included in the chat, and we can update that donor's contact information. Christine, does that answer your question? Or if you want to share what what you mean by qualify?
Right. Excuse my voice. So I'm on our Salesforce right now, and the previous person that did this put a donor name in, and it's just been sitting there since the 28th of June, and it still hasn't been qualified, but she's been a regular donor, so I'm not very sure. I'm not very sure what to do from here, because I do remember that it was mentioned before that you guys were having some Salesforce issues. So I don't know if that's why it still has sitting there as pending.
Yeah, Yeah, that's the reason. Your organization's on a quarterly timeline, and those quarterly certificates were not produced as they should have. So those are going to stay pending until hopefully this week we'll get those changed to approved status, and your certificates will be available to send out.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I can go ahead and show what she was meaning by that. So on the contributions tab, the status here is approved. For those on the quarterly timeline, those are still saying pending. But everybody on immediate status, yours show approved as soon as you submit that contribution. So we can go ahead and look at the one that I just submitted a moment ago. When you click on the donation, the contribution, I mean, you can see the information here, and you can see the intermediary organization name here as well. So if you ever need to check on a contribution, if it was submitted with associated with the correct intermediary, that is listed here. And then the associated tax credit certificate. Let's go ahead and look at that as well. So the only thing that's changed on the certificate itself is the tax ID. So because we're only looking at the 4 digits of the Social Security number now, that is what's going to be included on the tax credit certificate. And I apologize, my computer's being slow. There it goes. Okay, so as you can see, it's just the last 4 digits for the tax ID, and then it says SSN there as well. The intermediary organization's not included on the certificate, but it is included along with the contribution. I am going to also review the donor platform. So some of your organizations use the donor submission form by providing that to your donor so that they can submit their own contributions, and then you go through and approve it. So I wanted to show you what that looks like on their end as well. So as usual, they're going to look for your organization name, and they'll search for it as usual. And they'll also select the appropriate project. And then they'll select what type of contributor they are. We're going to go ahead and show you the individual because that is the tax ID change here. So if I were to try to submit the full 9 digits, let's go ahead and see. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to the note here that says last 4 digits. And I click next, it's going to give an error, and it's going to tell the donor the tax ID must be 4 digits. So if I go ahead and just select 4 digits there, it lets me move forward with the form and go ahead and submit the contribution information. And as you can see, it asks the donor, is this gift through an intermediary organization, yes or no? Hopefully this will help flag for you as you're reviewing the contribution to make sure that you're looking at the records to make sure, okay, was this gift actually through an intermediary organization? Which one was it, etc. But as you can see, it did not ask them the name of the intermediary organization. That was a conscious choice on our part part to make sure that you all, as the ones who are processing those gifts, to be able to submit that information instead of asking the donor to look up the intermediary organization. So I was able to submit that contribution as a test donor. And now if I go to contributions on my nonprofit account, I can go to draft contributions to review. This is the one I just went through and submitted. So it's currently in draft status. And there's no intermediary organization listed yet because I'm still needing to review it. So I'm going to, everything else say it looks good, the date, the amount, project, all of that looks accurate. So I'm going to go through and approve. Enter the tax year. Is this gift through an intermediary organization? This is an opportunity. If the donor made a mistake and they gave directly to your organization, or it was something that went straight to you, it didn't go through a pass-through organization, then you could select no instead. However, I'm going to say for this test that we're going to say yes. And this is your opportunity to search for that intermediary organization. So you could search for Colorado Gives or United Way, whatever. I'm going to pretend to search for one now. The reason these are popping up automatically is because I've been using the system a lot the past couple of days, and these are just recent intermediary organizations that I've used or searched for recently. So you may, especially your first time, there's not going to be a list that pops up, but it is nice if you are submitting multiple contributions and you have a common intermediary that pops up, you can go ahead and select that. This is an opportunity for you to verify the donor information. So I'm going to put in the last name and the last 4 digits. No donors found. This means that the donor was not found in the system based on that tax ID and that last name. So this is my opportunity to go ahead and submit that donor information from scratch. So I'm just going to type in some fake information here. And as you can see, ITIN is an option if that individual taxpayer does not have a Social Security number. And I'll go ahead and just use that as an example this time. This is an opportunity for you to check that donor's address, phone number, and email that they submitted on the donor form. And final summary page for you to check everything. Everything looks good. I'm going to submit. And now that intermediary organization was updated here now that it is approved. Any other questions related to the Salesforce platform and the changes? All right. We'll go back to the slides here. So I do want to make a note regarding fees. This is important, especially as you submit contributions, to make sure you understand the guidelines regarding fees through intermediary organizations and payment processors. So essentially, fees are disregarded for a donor's HCTC contribution amount. And so this goes both ways. If a donor elects to pay a fee to the intermediary, that fee is not included in the HCTC contribution amount. If you think about it, that fee went directly to the intermediary. You didn't see those funds at all, and the donor did not intend for those funds to go to the project and programming at your organization. They meant to just give to that intermediary nonprofit to cover the fee associated with processing their payment. So, yeah. So on the other hand, if your organization has to cover a fee because the donor elected not to, then that fee is not deducted from the donor's contribution amount. We are honoring the donor's intended donation that they intended to give to your organization. And so this may result in giving a tax credit for a contribution amount higher than what you actually received in your account when that payment actually went through. An example of this would be a donor gives $100 through an intermediary organization, and they're hoping to give to your shelter program. And so they elect not to cover any fees. They're just wanting that $100 to go to your organization. But on the back end, there's a fee deducted, say $5. There's a fee deducted for processing that payment through the intermediary. And your organization, you only ultimately receive $95 for that donation. Basically, the donor's not penalized for that fee. That's just a cost that your organization will cover, and you're going to honor that donor's intended amount of $100 for their donation amount. And so this situation may come up with credit card processing, other online payments as well. So just wanted to clarify that. If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Awesome. Well, we just have one more slide. I wanted to share a few program reminders. So hopefully you're receiving the email newsletters that are being sent out whenever we have updates. In those couple of latest e-newsletters, there was a memo included, a link to a memo that you can circulate within your organization or with your donors that just goes over the Salesforce changes and policy changes related to Senate Bill 24-16. So hopefully that clarifies things for you, and especially for your donors who may be confused about why things are changing. If you are unable to access that memo for whatever reason, please reach out. But I think we've had quite a few people accessing that. Another plug, as I mentioned, the annual report deadline was a part of the changes with these legislative changes. And so now the annual report data will be due from you by March 1st of 2025 for this calendar year's data. And I'm giving a plug now because it's already August. We're over halfway through the year, and just wanting to make sure that everyone is aware that the programs that are supported by your HCTC contributions, we do report out on those so that we can look at the impact on the community from your projects and be able to communicate that, as well as the fundraising impact of the tax credit. So the report will cover January 1st through December 31st of this year. And I know many on this call are not really related to your program staff necessarily. A lot of you are fundraising or donor relations staff, or maybe finance side. And so maybe there are some of your colleagues at your organization who are the ones who are tracking this data. If you can just use this as a reminder to check in with them and make sure that the data they're collecting aligns with what we're going to be asking for from HCTC. Those data points have been shared previously in our newsletters, but if you're new to HCTC or whatnot, I'll be sure to include that list in our next newsletter that goes out when I share the recording from this training. I also wanted to give a heads up that next month we're going to be asking for project reviews. So this is something that we do yearly to make sure that our information's up to date, that the project information we have on file is accurate, as well as we have updated our application form this year. So there are a couple of questions that everybody will need to update. This is important not only for our records, but because on the HCTC website, there is a list of approved organizations and projects. And we just want to make sure that that list is accurate for the public who accesses that information. And so again, that will be coming out in September, and we'll be communicating deadlines for that. It will be a document that we'll ask for you to edit and then send back to us, and we'll make those changes directly within Salesforce. You do not have the editing capabilities within your project information for Salesforce, but we do as admins of the account. And then final reminder is just for participation for this year. Most of you are, using Salesforce to submit contributions. You're able to communicate HCTC with your donors and how this is a successful fundraising tool in your tool belt. But I think some of you are also new to HCTC and just wanted to remind you to go ahead and start using HCTC for this tax year. And we do have minimum requirements of either logging $5,000 in HCTC contributions for the tax year, or contributions from 5 donors if that amount is less than $5,000. So we do want you and your donors to benefit from HCTC. We want to be good stewards of the administration of this program. And so that's why these program requirements are in place. If you are having challenges implementing HCTC with your organization, please reach out. I'm happy to help problem solve with you or discuss what those challenges are and try to mitigate those moving forward. So Abigail asks, are we required to know the FEIN of the intermediary organization? Yes, if you're submitting the if you're submitting a contribution for an intermediary that's not in the system, you will need to know the FEIN for that organization. If it's a common one that's been submitted already, then you will not. You can just look it up by the name of the organization. But otherwise, if you're that lucky first person to use that intermediary organization, you will need to know the FEIN. Is there a published list of intermediaries that DOLA will accept thus far? We do have a list of intermediaries that or I'm sorry, not a list of intermediaries. We have a list of donor advised funds within our handbook. And so we keep that as a running list as we find out about more donor advised funds that people have questions about. We update our handbook with a list of those. Otherwise, we're going to trust you and your authority by statute to issue tax credit certificates to be able to vet those contributions on if they're eligible or not. If it's through an intermediary organization that's not in our system and you're like, oh, I'm not sure, this might be a donor advised fund, you're welcome to reach out and we can help research on if that payment platform is a donor advised fund or just an intermediary or just a payment processor. There's you never know with a website what it might be. And so I do encourage you to make sure you are aware of that as you're submitting contributions. We also have a question. Can you distinguish again the difference in reports that are due March 1st versus the one due in June? So June is our deadline from the Division of Housing. So basically, we take all of the data that you submit on March 1st and clean it and make sure it's all good, and extrapolate from that and make sure that we have our presentation and report ready to publish in June. So there's a lot of work that goes on between March 1st and that June deadline. And so that's why we have the 2 dates there, and we would request for you to honor that deadline as well. I know that the beginning of the year was a really tight push for a lot of people this past year, because our deadline for the division was the February 15th, and that was just a challenge from everyone's standpoint. And so now we have a little bit of breathing room for next year, which we're really grateful for, but we want to utilize that so that our report is even better, more comprehensive, and more accurate. So hopefully March 1st is plenty of time for your organizations to get that accurate information to us so that we can in turn produce a really stellar report. And yeah, I've been addressing some questions in the chat, but if you have any others, feel free to raise your hand. This was the last slide that I was going to review, so we'll just have it open for any other questions. So we have a question on in-kind donations. If someone donates $10,000 of stock to our agency, does that qualify for HCTC? If so, how do I record that? Yes, so a stock donation is considered an in-kind donation. So our in-kind donations must be over $5,000, but $10,000 is over that threshold. You would need to make sure you have documentation of the fair market value of that stock on the date that it was donated. And you will include that documentation when you submit that contribution. I can go ahead and show you what that looks like on the contribution form. So when you go to submit the contribution, you can select donation type of cash or in kind. You would select in kind, put the amount as $10,000, include the date, and then here you would click upload, and that's where you would upload the file of that supporting documentation. All in-kind donations are required to have that supporting documentation of the appraisal of the fair market value of the item. Any other questions? Okay, well, as I mentioned, hopefully everything goes smoothly as you start using these updates. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer those, as well as we'll have our handbooks and all of that updated as well. And I'll be sending out a follow-up email once our this recording is included on YouTube. So once that link is available, I'll go ahead and send the recording out for those at your organizations who are not able to join. So thank you everyone for participating today and for just your continued work within HCTC.